So your spouse gets $1 million from your life insurance policy. They've never managed $1 million. They're grieving. They have kids that they need to take care of. What's the plan? If you don't know, you're not alone. Most parents stop thinking about the life insurance policy the day that they sign the paperwork. They get the protection, but they never plan for what would happen if the scenario were to come true. So there's a well-documented pattern on this. When families receive a large sum of money, whether from life insurance, a settlement, or they win the lottery, who knows, they tend to spend it down much faster than they had originally planned, sometimes a lot faster. The reason isn't that families are bad with money, it's just that nobody told them what to do with that large amount. In the case of life insurance, your family's grieving. They're exhausted. They're getting advice from family members who mean well, but probably don't know what they're talking about. So they start making decisions like pay off the car, or help out this person, or take a couple months off work. And 6 months later, half the money is gone. And so is the long-term plan that the policy was supposed to help with. So that's why getting the policy is half the work. The other half involves making sure there's a plan in place for your family to follow in the event of something really does happen to you. So I'm going to go over a framework with you on how you could spend the money. You could take this for your own family. You could utilize my framework. Just make sure you talk to a financial advisor. I'm not a financial advisor, but if you find one that is a fiduciary, they can help you finalize your plan. And if your family would actually need them, they can help execute that plan as well. So where do we start? Well, first off, you need some immediate cash for the first 90 days. A life insurance policy is not going to pay out right away. There needs to be time for it to be processed. So in the first 90 days, you need to have some kind of savings, some kind of cash amount that is set aside just for that time period. And that's going to go into paying for the funeral, legal fees, pay your mortgage or bills, food for your family, gas, all that stuff is going to need to be covered in the first 90 days. Now, it may not wait 90 days to get the policy money, but you at least have that cushion in case something were to happen within that beginning phase. Now, the next step is to have some kind of debt payoff. For most families, they'll want the mortgage, the cars, the student loans, those large monthly bills taken care of. They're not going to want to pay that. It's going to be a huge monthly stressor for them. So in this case, see what works for your family. If your family can manage the payment and draw down slowly from the policy to do it, great. If not, then set aside a certain amount of cash, from $200,000 to $500,000, to just pay off all those things in one go. So your family just doesn't have to worry about those monthly payments anymore. Now, the next step is going to be income replacement. So your spouse needs money to live off for the next 10 to 30 years, depending on your kids' ages and your spouse's working situation. Now, this part has to be the biggest chunk of your policy, and it has to be phased in two ways. Either it's structured in a way where you can invest that money and your spouse can draw from it annual, or it has to be big enough to where your spouse can draw from it and it's not going to need perfect discipline in order to make the money not go away overnight. Now, the next step is replacing the income. So the surviving spouse needs money to live off of, and that might be from 10 to 30 years, depending on how old your kids are and what their working situation is. Now, this is the largest chunk of your policy. That means that you either have two ways to handle this amount of money. You make the chunk so big that your spouse doesn't need to be super disciplined in taking money out of it. They don't need perfect investing behavior in order to draw down money and let it last. Or you make it to a point where it gets invested and your spouse takes from that investment. And that's where the fiduciary can help you set up so that there's recurring income coming in from this large chunk of money. And the last thing to think about is having a cushion for your spouse. You know, if this were to really happen to you, there's probably going to be other things around your family that are going to be occurring as well. We can't predict everything. And so having a little bit of money set aside during that time will also help your spouse in order to navigate those waters. And this goes beyond having just the savings, because the savings may be for a little bit of time, but who knows what may come up later on. And you're going to need to replenish those savings after they're being used. So that's where a section of your death benefit should go to as well. Just having an emergency fund that your spouse can use right away as a cushion in case something were to spring up that we just can't account for at this point. So what I didn't go into too much detail is how you make this cash last. So your family gets it. What now? You need to talk to a financial advisor, particularly a fiduciary one, that'll have your best interests in mind, because they can show you, okay, if you have this amount of money, this is the vehicle you could put it in, and it will give you this amount monthly or annual. And your family can then live off that return from the invested money. But you won't know what's available to you unless you actually talk to a fiduciary that can help you. You may think, well, I can only afford $800,000. Well, that $800,000 invested in certain ways can potentially last your family quite a bit. But if you never talk with them, you'll never find out what really are the options there. So path one, follow a fiduciary, have that money invested. Now, the second path is getting a policy that's large enough to where your family can draw from it and it won't go away until your kids are out of school, they're into the workforce, and they don't need that money anymore. Now, if you go down this route, the only issue is your spouse needs to have really good discipline when it comes to drawing. You can't overdraw. If you start overdrawing, the money is going to go faster and faster and faster, and it's not going to last the intended amount that you want it to. Now, both options are completely valid. You'd have to see which one your family would feel more comfortable with. In option one, you have to be comfortable with advisors. You got to talk to somebody and have somebody else manage your cash. In option two, your family needs to be comfortable with managing their own money. If they can do that, then option two could be much better option for them. But as I said, both options require different things, and your family ultimately has to be comfortable with which way you want to go. So the next best step is to actually write this out. Get a piece of paper, write out a plan. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be something that is with legal jargon or anything like that, but just write down a plan. If you guys have any further questions, just drop them in the comments, and give a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.